In our study, we showed that individuals who had more fiber at night had more deep sleep and less light sleep. And conversely, having more saturated fat was associated with less deep sleep and more light sleep.
If the approach is simply that you're going to drink a glass of tart cherry juice and then the rest of the time you are not going to focus on having a diet that's high in plant biodiversity, that's Mediterranean style, that's low in saturated fat and immediate release sugars, that's high in fibre, you're not going to see a significant impact in how you feel your sleep quality is and how you function in the daytime.
Hello and welcome to The Food Chain from the BBC World Service. I'm Ruth Alexander. Today we're finding out how to eat your way to a good night's sleep. Joining me from New York is Dr. Marie-Pierre Saintonge, nutrition scientist and author of Eat Better, Sleep Better.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us from London is Dr. Ali Hare, a consultant in sleep and respiratory medicine and president of the British Sleep Society.
Hello, nice to be here.
So, Marie-Pierre, what does the evidence say about the link between eating and getting a good night's sleep?
We've seen in multiple research now that individuals who have better dietary quality have a lower risk of developing sleep difficulties later in their life. And so, yes, there's a definite association between what you eat during the day and how you sleep at night.
And Ali, approaching it as a doctor, from what you see in your clinic, talking to patients, are you convinced that there is that what you eat influences how you sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely true to say that I see what my patients do in the daytime, including what they eat and when they eat it, undoubtedly has an impact on the quality and the quantity as well of their sleep.
What are the most common questions people have for you about food and sleep? And do they bring food up a lot?
Yeah, increasingly so, because I think people are increasingly understanding that things like nutrition, exercise, light exposure are all really important in terms of the quality of the sleep we then obtain at night time. So I definitely say I'm seeing more interest from my patients about whether or not they can improve their diet in ways that will have impacts on their sleep. I mean, we've always had questions about caffeine, for example, when we should have that and how much we should have. But increasingly, patients are asking me things about supplements to their diet or more generally what they should eat and the timing of that food as well, and how that might bring about improvements or indeed worsen their sleep.
Well, all questions I'd like to get into in this, so that's excellent. First, though, Marie-Pierre, what studies have been done to show us that how you eat will absolutely influence how you sleep?
So there have been multiple studies at all sorts of types of studies. So there have been multiple population-based studies that look at dietary patterns over long periods of time in large cohorts, showing that healthier dietary patterns are associated with better sleep and unhealthy dietary patterns are associated with worse sleep outcomes. There have been also smaller scale studies where we see exactly or we measure exactly in the lab what people are eating and then get very detailed assessments of their sleep using sleep testing like polysomnography, where we get to measure their deep sleep. So there have been those studies as well showing that there are certainly different nutrients that influence sleep. And then there have been also studies of dietary manipulations where we're asking individuals to eat certain foods throughout the day and assessing how their sleep is at night. And those studies have been over multiple days to multiple weeks.
And what's the physiological reason for diet being so closely linked with sleep?
Right, so there have been studies showing that what you eat can influence your melatonin levels that regulates your sleep-wake patterns. There's also alterations in the gut microbiome that lead to changes in inflammatory markers that are related to sleep and sleep onset, sleep propensity, and sleep maintenance. So those types of studies show us that there's show us a physiological mechanism by which dietary intakes can influence sleep.
So what sorts of foods should we be eating then if we want to improve how we sleep?
So this has been answered in multiple types of studies. Like I mentioned, in the population-based studies, we have information about large-scale patterns. So diets that look more like a Mediterranean pattern, higher in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lower in animal-based foods, lower in sugar. But then from our own research where we evaluate food intakes in the lab, we see different similar patterns really, but when we talk about nutrients, diets that are higher in fiber, which we find in fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and lower in saturated fats, which we find in more plant-based types of foods, are associated with more deep sleep at night. And we also had a publication that came out just recently showing that young adults who eat more fruits and vegetables have less arousals at night.
Do we know why that is? Why fruit and vegetables and a diet high in fibre will improve your sleep?
Right, so fruits and vegetables contain what we know are as phytomelatonin, so plant-based source of melatonin that could contribute to your own melatonin levels. They have nutrients that can help you produce your own levels of melatonin, and they're also higher in fiber. They help regulate blood glucose levels. They feed the gut microbiome in such a way that leads to a more beneficial gut microbial profile that could be related to better sleep.
Ali, do you talk to your patients about eating more fruit and vegetables? And do you see a change in them if they do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think increasingly through the work that Marie-Pierre and her team are doing, and other teams across the world really are increasingly doing, looking at microbiota manipulations, dietary manipulations. It's definitely something that as clinicians now we're using more and more in the way we advise our patients around improving sleep quality. So I definitely include that in my sleep hygiene advice now. I don't like that term really, but when I'm talking to patients about other things that they can do to improve their sleep health, I absolutely always talk about diet now, and I'm particularly interested, and it's so lovely to hear Marie-Pierre speaking herself about this, but I'm particularly interested in the microbiome and how that impacts on sleep quality and duration. And I think as we understand more about how the gut and the brain interact, we inevitably understand that, of course, that is going to impact on sleep, which is, of the brain, by the brain, and for the brain. So I think it's fascinating to hear not only about a Mediterranean diet, which is definitely what I advise my patients, and lots of plant diversity, lots of fibre, but also that potentially some dietary supplementation might improve the microbiome and thereby improve sleep quality as well. So I do sometimes talk about things like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, and adding those supplements into your diet, or indeed having food products that contain those bacteria as well. Yeah, absolutely, we should be talking about this with patients, of course.
Talking to people on the BBC World Service Facebook page and asking them what questions they have for you. And Mohammed in Dubai asks, can diet impact our sleep stages? He says, can a diet high in fibre, or conversely one high in sugars, affect our deep sleep and REM cycles?
Yes, in our study, we showed that individuals who had more fiber at night had more deep sleep and less light sleep. And conversely, having more saturated fat was associated with less deep sleep and more light sleep. And in the same study, we showed that consumption of more refined carbohydrates, simple sugars, things we find in white products, white bakery products, white grains, is associated with more arousals. So when we talk about arousals, it's basically going from a deeper to a lighter stage of sleep more frequently, and therefore you're not getting as much deep sleep as you should. You're just shifting to lighter stages of sleep more frequently.
Asda asks, how does meal timing affect our sleep? So does it matter when we eat?
So I think it's a matter of balancing timing and quantity, right? So a large meal close to bedtime can interfere with sleep, but further away from bedtime may not have as such an adverse effect. But also, you don't want to go to bed hungry, as that might disturb your sleep at night and make you wake up hungry in the middle of the night, and then you have more difficulty falling back asleep. So balancing this hunger satiety ratio before going to bed, I think, is important. It's something that individuals should evaluate on their own. But generally, we speak about not eating a meal as close as 3 hours before bedtime.
I think it's also just important to think that when we talk about our sleep rhythms and our circadian rhythm, that our gut and our microbiome also have a circadian rhythm. So the timing of food also impacts on our microbiome. Our microbiome also impacts on how we digest that food at different times of day. So I think, again, there's something, I think, Marie-Pierre, as well, about our circadian rhythm and how eating and the foods that we eat is also a way that we signal to our brain and body what time of day it is. So that can also help to entrain circadian rhythms. So not only, again, it's a bidirectional relationship, isn't it? We talk about this so much in biology and physiology, that not only is the timing and type of food that we eat, what's known as a Zeitgeber, something that tells our brain and body what time of day it is, but also that because our microbiome also has a circadian rhythm, and as does our gut physiology and much of our other physiology, that how we handle foodstuffs at different times of day may look different as well.
If you have a patient who's stuck in that kind of vicious cycle, they're tired, so then they make the wrong choices about food, and then they eat late at night when they're really tired, and then they don't sleep well, so they're even more tired the next day. Do you give them tips as to how to break that cycle?
Yeah, of course. And as Marie-Pierre mentioned, we know that insufficient sleep impacts on our hunger and satiety, and we tend to gain weight. In fact, there's some really nice data showing how every hour of sleep loss contributes significantly to increases in our BMI. So I think it's really important to be open and honest with patients about how sleep timing and duration also impacts on our ability to make healthier choices in the daytime, and that then can become a vicious cycle whereby our sleep is then of worse quality. And again, as I touched on before, these choices that we make then also tend to feed into things like how much energy we might have for movement in the daytime. So we tend to become somewhat more sedentary. That can contribute to weight gain, and weight gain can also worsen sleep quality through mechanisms like increasing upper airways resistance or indeed sleep apnea. So absolutely, I will often talk not only through Marie-Pierre's and her team's work about the types of food that we know can help with sleep quality, but also when that food should ideally be consumed, and approaching the day in as healthy a way as possible in service of then being able to have better sleep at night time.
You mentioned it's not a good idea to go to bed hungry either. So what does a good bedtime snack look like if you're not going to, sort of interrupt the sleep that should be coming?
Right, so I think the key word is snack, right? So snacks usually we consider as providing 100 to 150 calories. So that would be maybe a yogurt, a piece of fruit, a little bit of whole grain cereal with milk, something that's light, that's easily digestible, that won't be too rich, so not too high in fat, for example.
Ali, do you ever get the sense that people are a bit disappointed by your healthy eating advice about sleep? And do you find people are sometimes looking for, is there one food that's going to be the wonder food that will help me sleep?
Yeah. Oh, I think people are looking for the one supplement often, or we're fed a lot of these things, aren't we, on social media, this magical powder or this magical tablet that you can take that will, help you sleep better immediately from tonight. And of course, Marie-Pierre and I know that there is no such magic bullet, unfortunately. And if there was, I'm sure, we would be doing very well for ourselves. Actually, you're right, it is much more about a holistic approach to our diet, as it is with everything. And I do always counsel patients that you're not going to see an immediate improvement, tonight if you increase your fibre intake today. But it is much more about taking a longer term view. And I have to say that I do find that increasingly people do understand that in order to invest in our health more broadly, and sleep is a very important part of that, that does take time and consistency. And I think that's something I always really emphasise. But yes, absolutely, the market market for that magic powder or pill or supplement that is going to be the one thing that really impacts your sleep is huge. And I think that the truth of it is, you need to look at the whole diet, as you do need to look at your whole approach to health and well-being in order to be able to really see some of the improvements that Marie-Pierre's been highlighting.
Are there studies that have been done into specific foods, though? I can't resist asking whether there are some foods that maybe could help you get a little bit drowsy or just calm down and get a good night's sleep.
There's 2 studies I know of kiwi fruit. The one didn't have a control group in that study, so we can't really compare the effect versus something else that participants could have eaten. And the other study had a control group, but there was improvements in both. So the kiwi fruit and it could be that both fruits have benefits, but they both had sleep improvement effects. I think that the data are promising, but need further evaluation.
I mean, should you be eating a kiwi fruit like before bed, or could it be any time in the day to get the potential benefit?
So most of the time, studies evaluate the impact. Well, we actually have to tell people, if we're looking at the impact of a food, it's better to tell them when to eat it so that it's not that variable across participants. So oftentimes studies that test various foods will give, let's say, a dose in the morning, a dose in the evening, maybe twice a day, 3 times a day, or once a day. Typically, when they give once a day, it would be in the evening. But to me, I think that it's important to have a healthful diet throughout the day. And when we're talking about foods having an impact on sleep through the gut microbiome or through improving or having all the nutrients necessary to produce melatonin, it's not going to happen in the 1 to 2 hours before bedtime, right? So the gut microbiome takes time to change, and that's why eating healthfully across multiple days, across days, is the better option, in my opinion.
Are there any other? Sorry, I will persist with this. We all want to know. Are there any specific foods which look
There have been
promising?
Several studies on tart cherry juice, and I like this, to mention those because it's not just one study. There's been 4, 5 studies in multiple types of groups: older adults, middle-aged adults, younger adults, and they all show a supporting effect, and they're double-blind and placebo-controlled. And so there's rigorous research on these on tart cherries having a benefit for sleep. There's been good studies on there's one good study I know of on tomatoes. Tomato supplementation in postmenopausal women that shows increases in melatonin levels and improvements in self-reported sleep quality. Studies with walnuts, tryptophan-enriched cereal, as I mentioned. So there have been several studies like that.
But I think nothing is going to be more powerful, though, than potentially including these in your diet. But I think if the approach is simply that you're going to drink a glass of tart cherry juice, and then the rest of the time you are not going to focus on having a diet that's high in plant biodiversity, that's Mediterranean in style, that's low in saturated fat and immediate release sugars, that's high in fibre, you're not going to see a significant impact in how you feel your sleep quality is and how you function in the daytime. So it's for me, and I think Marie-Pierre, the research bears this out more broadly, that the most powerful dietary approach when you look at improving sleep quality is exactly that, is not to pick one fruit and try to consume that every night in the hopes that you'll start to feel drowsy. It is to look at your whole diet and ensure that, and kiwis can absolutely be part of that. They're high in fibre but as Marie-Pierre indicated, I think a lot of what that misses is the way in which the foods that we eat and the way in which we combine those foods is also really important in terms of releasing some of those micronutrients and phytonutrients. And I think if we start to focus on individual foodstuffs, we're missing a lot of the ways in which the foods we eat and the way in which we combine them are also really important for overall gut health, and thereby probably through some of that mechanism, through the gut microbiome impact on sleep.
And if there's someone out there who's taking in all this information and thinking, there's a lot I need to change, what one thing should they change tonight? What should they start with to ensure a better night's sleep?
So I would start by reducing intakes of simple carbohydrates, simple sugars. Actually, I would do many things, but reducing simple sugars, increasing fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and whole grains.
Okay, so simple sugars, that's going to be like candy, crisps, white bread, that kind of thing.
Fizzy drinks. I think fizzy drinks, people often don't realise how much sugar they contain and how highly processed they are as well. And it fills you up, and so it leaves us room for all the other fantastic nutrients that we need.
Ali, what one change would you tell someone to start with?
I mean, I think it's difficult to pick one thing because, as we keep emphasising, actually it's about a whole diet approach. In terms of kind of what I see most commonly, though, that I think would make a significant change, I would say caffeine and alcohol, one or both of those. I totally understand it. My clients are often, and my patients are often really tired, so they become increasingly reliant on caffeine. And as Marie-Pierre mentioned, of course, that isn't only in coffee. A lot of my patients are using very high caffeine and sugar content fizzy drinks to consume caffeine throughout the day. So often it's making that one change to reducing caffeine and sugary drinks. And then, unfortunately, as I've said before, I'm sorry to be the harbinger of doom, but I'm often advising patients on reducing alcohol intake as well in order to improve their sleep and their overall health as well.
Okay, well, what I'm taking away from this then is getting a good night's sleep isn't about finding that one miracle food, but eating a healthy diet with a variety of fruit and vegetables and unsaturated fats can help. And staying off alcohol is probably a good idea too. Well, thank you very much to my guests, Dr. Marie-Pierre St-Onge in New York.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
And Dr. Ali Hare in London.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to you for watching. You can watch other episodes of The Food Chain here on YouTube, including one about fibre and one about what you should eat for breakfast. And we have a new podcast episode coming out every week. To find it, search for The Food Chain online or wherever you find your BBC podcasts.